Cool. And with that, let's talk about savings vaults. THORFi is fun. THORFi is awesome. I'm sure we'll have more sessions to do on that in the future. But today we're here to discuss the savings vault feature, which actually as of 1.98, which I believe there's only one more node left to adopt. But as of the new version that we put out earlier this week, savings vaults will be live on mainnet. With the caveat there being that they will not yet be accruing yield. So do not try to go in, or do if you'd like, but yeah, basically the savings vault feature is going live this week on StageNet and mainnet. And so what we're going to do today is do a little bit of a demonstration of savings vaults and show you kind of how they work. We'll also discuss in a little bit of detail what the economics of the savings vaults are. We will talk about sort of what the next stage of the rollout plan is and how we plan to get the feature turned on and fully adopted by node operators. And then we'll maybe do some discussion around how the protocol owned liquidity will be queued up next to complement savings vaults and to really bring the entire feature into completeness. So yeah, with that, let's start out. Familiar Cow, did you want to share your screen and kind of walk us through the little economics of savings vaults diagram that you put together? Oh, I think you're on mute. Okay.
Yeah. Give me a couple of minutes here. You can let Chad start off on the economics of savings vaults. I'll try and pull up the graphic.
I've got it right here. I can share it. But yeah, I mean, Chad, do you want to just start off and just give sort of a very high level overview? What is a savings vault? Eli 5, like I've never heard of it before. What is a savings vault on THORChain?
Yes. Okay. So the savings vault is, or another way you could call it an interest account, because you could call it that too, more or less the same thing. But the idea is that you can deposit a layer 1 asset that's external to the THORChain network. So Rune itself does not work for this purpose, but you can use Bitcoin and Doge and ETH and other assets, and the network itself will earn you a yield on that asset without exposure to any other assets. Because anytime you're providing liquidity into a liquidity pool, you're exposing yourself to generally 2 assets, sometimes more, but generally speaking 2 assets, and you're exposed to the price movements of both, and which causes some kind of complexities around like how do you calculate your. So part of what the sexiness is of savings is that like it becomes a super easy thing to participate in, very relatively speaking at lower risk, and you can calculate how much money you're making, and how much money you're making generally only goes in one direction. It only goes up, right? So you don't see price movements causing you to lose some of your yield. You just basically get an up only savings account that just gets you more Bitcoin, right? With the caveat is the only time you can actually lose Bitcoin is when you have to pay swap fees when you enter the position. You have to pay swap fees when you exit the position. So outside the context of those minor swap fees, you only go up, and so that becomes a very attractive feature because there's a massive amount of people who want to earn BTC on their BTC, and there's not a massive amount of people who want to earn BTC and Rune simultaneously, and so that difference is going to create a significant demand on this network, and just have a lot more capital get thrown into the pools.
Awesome. So yeah, let's take a look real quick. I have this diagram right here, and this kind of shows what actually is happening under the hood with the pools and the savings vaults when you deposit or withdraw from a savings vault. So today, in order to deposit to a savings vault, all you need to do is look up on the inbound addresses endpoint which basically that's just an endpoint that tells you which Asgard vault is ready to receive your deposit, and then just craft a memo that says I'm going to take this 1 ETH and deposit it directly into the ETH savings vault. And so what's actually happening under the hood there is that you're doing a swap, or sorry, let's use BTC in this example. So what happens when you do that deposit is you're actually just doing a swap. So you're swapping 50% of your Bitcoin to Rune. And so now you've got net pool positions of 1 Bitcoin has been added and 49.50 has been removed because it's a swap against the pool. And then Rune is deposited into the liquidity pool using that half of that Rune that you swap for. That is deposited into the liquidity pool and is used to mint a synthetic BTC. And then so now that you have that synthetic BTC, that goes ahead and gets locked into the vault module, into the as a savings position. So what happens in between there is that Rune's price increased because we added BTC, and we all right. So that should actually be Rune's price decreased against BTC. Right. Number 3, Rune's price has decreased against BTC, so an arbitrage would buy Rune.
If Rune's price is increasing, that means the arbitrage bot would buy BTC and sell and acquire Rune. And if Rune's price is decreasing, the arbitrage bot would buy BTC and then acquire the Rune for.
Yeah. So sorry, I think the diagram is wrong there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's in reverse.
Yeah. So actually, what happens? Yeah, my mistake for that. So basically, when you're taking that, when you're swapping that that BTC to Rune, by creating the synth, you're essentially incentivizing an arbitrager to come in and sell BTC back into pool and buy Rune. And then that rebalances the price. And then synthetic BTC is locked into the vault module. When you burn it, same thing. When you withdraw from the same savings module, same thing basically happens in reverse. The synthetic BTC is burned, the Rune is removed from liquidity pool, swapped to BTC, and the user gets back their 1 BTC plus any yield that's been accrued as a result of being essentially an LP in that pool during that time. So that's essentially the different scenarios for savings. We'll put together a revised one of these and send it back out in the core channel, or sorry, in the like in the mainnet channel. But let's jump in now into like a little bit of actually first, are there any questions about that? Because it was a little bit confusing. Does anyone, we can clarify any specifics?
Well, we can post we'll fix the image and we'll post it into economics channel. This is an economics thing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. So let's jump in now to the there's a question in the chat. Are we able to single side stake Rune now too as well? Right now, there's no plan for that. That has not been implemented in the current that's not in the current implementation. But there has been some talk of that, and there are different ways we could do that. I don't know, Chad. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the reason why we don't do that is because if you were to allow it, in some sense, you would effectively create Rune sell pressure, right? Because depositing that Rune, you're making the pool a bit heavy on the Rune side, which is going to cause arbitrage bots to sell the Rune. With layer 1 BTC, when you acquire a synth, you're actually creating buy pressure, right? So I think that's the reason, at least so far, why we haven't supported that quite yet. I'm open to coming back to this question and re-hypothecating over it and thinking more on it. But I think the intention is that by having it just be layer 1's external to THORChain, it'll naturally create buy pressure on the Rune asset, which is what we want to see.
Right. All right,
Like,
cool.
we really want the rune to be used not for that purpose, like by itself. We want it to be like either paired with an asset, or we want it to be, you know, even better on the bond side. Like hypothetically, like let all the BDCers in the world like create the pool liquidity, and let the rune holders create the bond liquidity in some sense, right? To maximize efficiency.
Cool. All right, cool. So let's take a look at an example here. We're going to use the StageNet essentially to demonstrate that process, how that works under the hood. We'll just take a look. I actually did last night I'll show a real-time example, but for now, I'll just show you this transaction that I did last night, essentially in preparation for testing. So what happened was like I said, I went and looked up on the inbound addresses, the actual ETH vault that you can send Ethereum to. So again, like this, I think is one of the coolest parts about this feature, is that you don't need a rune address to interact with single-sided savings vaults. And that's like that's a really, really important thing, because what that will allow, for example, is for people who have never heard of THORChain to earn yield on THORChain by depositing their BTC without even knowing that THORChain exists. So that was a key sort of design decision in implementing this feature. So really all you have to do is like come to this endpoint, look up what is the inbound address for AVAX, BNB, BTC, and then just send to that address however much ETH you want. Let's just say in this case 0.05. And what we're going to do is we're going to do that's an add plus or add ETH/ETH, which in this case the slash denotes that it's a synthetic. And that should be all that we need. It's literally that simple. Add into the ETH. No address, no other Thor addresses.
So just to make it even nicer, I think I'm not sure if we made the actual code change yet, but like you can not even include the memo, right?
Yes, we have discussed and we have scoped out how to do that without with memoless, but I don't think that we've implemented it yet. But yes, in the future, you'll be able to just send directly from a wallet to a vault, and based on the amount that you're sending, it'll either signify whether there's an add or a withdrawal. So yeah, we have scoped memoless here.
That's really big, because that would allow somebody in a Trust wallet or Ledger or a Trezor or like whatever to be able to like somebody could create like a website called like bdcyield.com, for example, and all it's really doing is just like creating a little QR codes for you to scan with your Trust wallet phone or like your Ledger or whatever, and it just does all the programming for you. But like it's just telling you what amounts to send where, blah blah blah, whatever, and it's just the whole thing would just work without needing to use like necessarily THORSwap or THORWallet or any of these things.
Right. So here's our ETH transaction. This is just like L1 ETH, vanilla send from this is our StageNet wallet to the StageNet vault. And then if we go over to view block, we'll be able to see this add liquidity here. So again, we just added into the ETH/ETH vault. So what's happening under the hood there? We are basically, just give me a second to find it. All right, so yes, so I'm going to refresh our savers. Now we have a new saver, this 5430. He basically has 4,800 units in this in the savings pool. This other one I did last night that was 0.1 ETH, so roughly double that is about 94. So you can see that because I just did a savings deposit of 0.05 ETH, and then yesterday this guy did a savings deposit of 0.1 ETH, that this guy has roughly half as many units in the savings pool as the other guy. So and I'll just for posterity, I'll just pull that up and show you that too. So that's the 0.05 ETH. And then this was the 0.1 ETH. So again, so they have, this guy has roughly, you know, 75% of the pool. This guy has roughly 25% of the pool. And so what happens now is that under the hood, we can go and look. Okay, so this last ad height was at 415.205.75. Let's take a look at the pool before and after. So just add it, open up a new tab here. And before, after, let's pull those side by side just so you guys can see them. Side. Okay, cool. So the first thing that we can see here is that the LP units did not change because again, the savers are separate from liquidity providers. They're a completely different thing. They don't influence the proportion of LP units in the pool. Of course, what they do influence is the balance assets. So what we have here is if I take all values are in 1E8, so that's 3.73. This one is 3.68. So, you know, of course, the difference between those two is going to be exactly the amount of the asset that we just deposited, which is 0.05. So that's expected. What happened there was that we went from 3131 rune in the pool to 3130. So again, as we were explaining just then, what's happening is that ETH is being added into the pool, rune is being taken out in order to essentially create that synthetic ETH that we swapped to under the hood. And then the synth units should increase as well, right? So yeah, we went from 1.461 to 1.9522 as a result of minting that synth through the swap. So that more or less will show you, that's basically showing you kind of the you know, like how the pool is affected by the savers. We obviously we have this as well. We have the sorry, so what we were saying before is to calculate your share of the pool, or as a saver, for example, you would use this units right here. So we could do like this over the, remind me, Chad, real quick, is it synth? It's synth units, right?
Not synth units. You do it over. Are you trying to figure out how much of this person owns of the of the synth pool?
Yeah.
This is the ETH.ETH pool, which you want to look at is the savers thing. So you can look /pools.
Oh, right. That's right. Yeah. It's a little confusing. We might change that just for like usability. That would be the pool units, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We should have like another endpoint.
No, it's 6633. That's what happens when you take 50% and then take 50%. Yeah, that's my bad. Yeah. I'm bad at math. Right. So yeah, we can see here that this guy has 33.95% of the pool as a result of his 0.05 ETH contribution. This guy has 66%. Right. So yeah, that's kind of just like the mechanics of how this works. Then in order to do a withdrawal, I would take the, I would just do an ETH withdrawal. Again, this could be memo-less in the future, but for right now, again, it's just signing this transaction on the L1 chain.
You need an amount.
Huh?
A basis points. You missed the basis points.
Oh, right. Yeah, 10,000 basis. Sorry, we need to withdraw 10,000 basis points, which is basically saying withdraw my entire position here. Paul, on that, thank you. And then we'll wait.
So in this particular case, like he's withdrawing, but this is StageNet, so there wasn't any trades or swaps. So most likely he'll withdraw less ETH than you put in.
Yeah.
Because he's paying swap fees to enter, and then you're paying swap fees to exit. And between those 2 points, there was no yield because nobody was swapping on stage in those last few minutes. And so he'll be at a slight loss in that scenario.
Yeah, precisely. Also because of the outbound fee as well.
Right, outbound fee, gas fee, all that stuff has to be calculated and accounted for.
Exactly. So yeah, in a moment we'll receive back, a little bit less than 0.05 ETH, probably like 0.035, or maybe even less. Yeah, 0.039 ETH comes back to my wallet there. So obviously in a mainnet environment, there would be a ton of swaps and volume going through these pools, which generates yield. Chad, did you want to talk quickly about like sort of the value accrual, how that gets split between LPs and synth providers? I think that includes like sort of the demonstration portion for now.
Sure. Yeah. So when somebody mints a synth and just like holds it in a wallet, they're contributing value to the pool, but they don't have a position in terms of the yield that pool generates. And so all they're just doing is basically more or less a guarantee that they put one Bitcoin in, they got one synthetic BTC, and that they're going to get one Bitcoin back later on when they want to burn their synth to the layer one asset, minus swap fees, of course. So the yield of that person is basically zero, right? And so a yield bearing synth is like, well, now you're not going to get zero, now you're going to get some kind of yield. And then how much yield are you going to get? The way the code is generated now is that, and this can be configured later if you want to change it, but like right now it's just giving me 50%. So the network can calculate how much yield your capital has produced, in the pool in the last, hour or whatever, and it's earned, $50 worth of value, and so we will basically mint $25 worth of value into the savers to give you that yield. And so basically, you're getting half the yield that you would have because you're only providing, half the assets. Like you could have put in Rune and Bitcoin, but you're just putting in Bitcoin, and so the network needs to make sure that you kind of earn a lower yield for taking less risk, because it's a less riskier position you're taking by doing savers. And so the yield should reflect that. And so right now that's just hard set at a 50%. And so the network will, every day or so, it will kind of wake up, calculate how much yield the pool made in the last 24 hours, and then calculate how much of that yield is by the savers, and then divide that number basically by 2, and then mint that amount of cents into the savers bucket, which creates the yield for those people and moves that yield from the LPs into the savers people.
Right. So yeah, that brings us to sort of like the next topic, which is how we're going to essentially roll this feature out. So what needs to be set first is that synth yield cycle in order to actually start doing that value accrual from LPs to savers. And so essentially to do that, we'll kick off a symbolic vote with node operators, where we'll have them basically vote to enable savings vaults. We'll send out an announcement later today about that. And then once that gets approved by a 2/3 majority of node operators, we will do an admin mimir to set the synth yield cycle. That only needs to be admin set for now because we just want to make sure that if there's anything that, any bugs that arise, that we can essentially disable that in the future. And then once, in a few months, once we're relatively confident everything is working as expected, then, node mimir could be used to essentially lock that in permanently on a daily basis. To be setting that value accrual. So that's really operationally the first thing that needs to happen. And then from there, we will more or less, as of 198's adoption, which should be any minute now, there's only one node left to adopt 198. Savings vaults will basically be live. So as soon as that gets adopted, then people can just start locking synths into vaults. And then as soon as the vote passes, vaults will be earning yield on synth. So that's super exciting, and we're looking forward to seeing how that plays out with like the relatively limited amount of synths that there are today. But really, what gives the feature its potency is when it's combined with protocol owned liquidity, because protocol owned liquidity is what we use to essentially get the target utilization for synths in line with the actual utilization, which is what allows us to add more cumulative savings vaults, add more cumulative assets into savings vaults. Without protocol and liquidity, we would just hit the synth cap almost immediately, and we'd never be able to add any more, until the price of Rune organically increased. But the all other variables staying equal. So what happens? So what we're going to do next after synth savings vaults are live is begin the rollout of protocol and liquidity, and that will involve essentially the community coming together to decide what is the best use of the protocol reserves leverage. Essentially, it's the protocol reserve is finite. It needs to be used to pay out block rewards to LPs, to node operators. It needs to be used to cover impermanent loss protection to LPs, and then now it's going to be used essentially to meet the other side of that other 50% that's needed, in the pool. And this is kind of like a handy-wavy way of explaining it, but it's like you can think of savings vaults being half of a liquidity position, and then protocol and liquidity being the other half, creating that 50-50, Rune BTC, Rune ETH parity that we need. In reality, it's much more complicated under the covers, as we've just shown. And it involves synths and swaps, but you can think of it that way in a simplistic way. So basically, the next thing that we're going to be doing after we roll out the savings vaults is to start the process of enabling protocol and liquidity. And so what we would like to see is like people starting to discuss both here and in the general chat. Two big things we need to decide. The other two are kind of just like tuning. But the two big things we need to decide as a community, because it really affects all of us. Like the protocol reserve is sort of like the one of the more important things for the protocol. It allows the protocol to function, and it helps bootstrap trade rewards. So what we need to come together as a community to figure out is what assets do we want protocol owned liquidity to be added for? Which assets do we want the protocol reserve to have exposure in? And that's pretty important, because if an asset were to tank and the protocol reserve had a big position in it, we're essentially creating leverage in the protocol where that room will need to be used to make the synths whole if they were to withdraw from their savings vault, which creates a liability on the protocol reserve. So our internally like discussed this, and we as Nine Realms, and I'm not sure who else agrees with this, but our position is that we should just start this with only BTC for now, because we've seen there's a proven user base of people who want BTC single-sided savings. We've talked to tons of customers, and like everyone's asking for BTC because that product doesn't exist anywhere else. There's places that you can already go to earn yield. You can use Rockpool to earn yield today, but there's no place that you can go and really, since the inclusion of DeFi, there's been nowhere to do. So we think that BTC is going to be that best, place to start and to validate this feature. So it's probably like what Nine Realms is going to ask the community to vote for. But if there's other people who feel otherwise, they should make their voice heard, so we can all start like discussing this sort of very important decision. And then from there, like the nodes will basically take. We'll instruct the nodes to vote based on the feedback from the community. So that's the first thing, is like which assets, and then how much Rune. So how much Rune is going to be the max deposit that the protocol reserve will trickle into the pools. You know, we've heard 1 million Rune, 2 million Rune. So really, like, what is, you know, and the protocol reserve today, I don't have the stat off the top of my head, but I'm going to look it up real quick. THORChain / what is it? Status. THORChain. Guys, what's that endpoint that gives you the? Someone know? It's like 123 million Rune right now, right? So, you know, keep in mind, like, that needs to give us 105, so about 165 million in the protocol reserve today. That needs to be, you know, that needs to, like, just to simplify the mental model, like, that amount of Rune needs to essentially cover as much impermanent loss as we think might happen in a black swan event for all of the liquidity in the network. If, you know, a very large number of people were to, like, pull out, like, how much ILP exposure would we have if there was a black swan event?
I think there's a good amount of people, I think, who are currently LPs who are going to want to leave and then become a saver, right? Because they opt for a lower risk but lower yield, you know, option.
That's true.
So like, I think that there's a non-zero chance that people just say, like, you know what, I just want to earn Bitcoin, I just want to earn Ethereum. And so the vast majority of the liquidity is just, like, basically just synths, and the POL is basically taking up the other part of that. In which case, like, the amount of ILP to be paid out would be, you know, basically nothing. We might even opt. I actually might even argue, and this is something for the community to discuss, but I actually might argue that we get rid of ILP entirely from the network now that we have another option. Like, if you don't want to get impermanent loss, because you're afraid of IL, then just become a saver, right? There's an option for you to kind of, like, contribute value without worrying about IL. And so, like, part of me just says, like, we should just get rid of ILP once this feature is, you know, out there. Of course, the network has the nodes have to discuss this idea and come to a decision, and that would be voted on through the voting process and all that stuff. But, like, part of me just like, let's just get rid of ILP entirely.
Yeah, that definitely is a conversation that we should have. I encourage everyone to head over to Economic Design. I think makes the most sense to discuss, you know, these matters there. But yeah, I think that this would be a good time to start to discuss getting rid of ILP, because it would certainly make it a lot easier to reason about the risk, you know, to the protocol reserve. So in addition to the risk to the protocol, so the protocol reserves have to do, like, those three things. It needs to foot the bill for ILP. It needs to pay out the bond and LP rewards in every block, and then it also needs to now essentially, you know, a piece of that pie needs to go into the different pools in order to bring the synth utilization down enough to make the savings vaults a viable feature. So again, so you can kind of see how all of these, like, you know, factors kind of play together, and it's up to us as a community to decide, like, what the correct amount of protocol owned liquidity is. If we were to, you know, just, like, remove ILP altogether, you know, we could potentially add a lot more protocol owned liquidity. That is called the max Rune deposit, POL max Rune deposit. So, like, you know, personally, I would say we should just start with, like, 1 or 2 million, and then like, kind of check in as a community, like, once a month, and then, like, do a new vote with the node operators to, like, increase that amount, you know, by ever, you know, larger amounts, and slowly ramp up. But, you know, again, like, yeah, we can just discuss and kind of weigh the pros and cons, and then, you know, as eventually this all falls into the hands of the node operators to decide, you know, how quickly protocol owned liquidity gets rolled out. But it's important to think of, like just how intertwined these two features are. Is, like, the speed at which savings vaults can gain adoption is directly correlated to the speed at which we ramp up protocol owned liquidity. So we just have to be you know, clear about, like, how much, you know, risk we're taking as a result, and that's going to be one of the follow-up things. So I guess now we'll talk about sort of, like, what are the key deliverables and next steps from 9 Realms. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is essentially putting all of this information, the diagrams, into sort of a working document that explains, what is this feature? What are the value accrual economics? How do you use it? As we demonstrated from like a technical perspective, it's very, very simple to use this product. So I think, we're going to wrap all of the, essentially like a how to use it, what it is, into like one nice and clean doc that we're going to start to distribute to all the integration partners that have been asking about this. But for us to just start spreading this information far and wide, that like this thing is live and this is how you use it. And then another thing that we're going to deliver is sort of like that rollout plan, which is like, okay, nodes, like here's the cadence. This is what we need to vote on. This is when we need to vote on it. And then basically monitoring the rollout and, starting with like a small amount, going and verifying that like all of the value accrual does work as expected. So there can be some analysis there. And then we're also going to put together some dashboards that we'll be able to use to monitor the exposure in real time to Protocol Owned Liquidity. And then finally, we need to just work with the Midgard teams to basically make sure that they have everything that is needed to be able to do things like calculate the yield of a savings pool. So there's some interesting nuances around that still need to be figured out. But all of this stuff will be happening in parallel over the next like 2-3 weeks or so while we roll this feature out. So super excited to get this feature off the ground. It's been, I don't know how many different iterations of THORFi we've been through, and how many different iterations of like potential single-sided liquidity, savings vaults. There's been so much iteration, and I'd personally just like to thank Chad and the core team for kind of having patience with us to kind of hold our hands and walk us smooth brains through it, because it certainly has not been easy to understand. And the things that we did understand, we brought to them our concerns about sort of, potential leverage that it created on the protocol. So I just like to take a moment to kind of really say, like, it's just been amazing how understanding that they've been as we've gotten ramped up in this process of understanding these features, and how willing they've been to like cooperate, in basically hearing out our feedback and incorporating it and changing the design like a dozen times. But I'm happy to say that like that sort of collaborative, feedback has given us all confidence that that launching this feature is going to be a success. So really happy to kind of be finally, after months and months working on this feature with the core team, getting ready to roll it out in the mainstream, in the main net. Cool. All right.
Thank you, Pluto.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is super exciting. I'm really, really excited. I've seen a lot of people in the comments that agree. I mean, I'm just happy to see that everyone kind of feels the same way that we do. Remove ILP, BTC only at first, and start with a small slug of a small-ish slug of Rune and ramp up from there. So it's great to see general alignment within the community. Spot Wig'em, yes, savings vaults are live as of 198, but will not be accruing yield until the node operators vote for that. Someone requested to speak. I don't know how this feature works. Oh, I just raised my own hand. All right.
Well, by the way, this is going to sound like I'm shilling, but I don't mean it in that context. But like, if you look at the synth liability on the pools right now, so take Bitcoin for example, it's about 3.4%. It should be able to go up to like 15 or so in terms of centralization. So what does that mean? Like, if we were to launch this feature tomorrow, so to speak, and people started to put BTC in to earn yield on their BTC, that means that a bunch of cents would be minted to do so, but also means that a bunch of BTC would be added to the pool without a Rune counterpart. And so what that means is that it would create natural arbitrage buy pressure on the Rune asset. And so if you figure that for, not just BTC, but for ETH and other pools as well, that should naturally just create a good amount of Rune buy pressure on the asset, which is going to be pretty exciting to see.
Yeah. Also, like, and again, not to shill, but like, just the way that this works with synths is like, if one BTC locked in now is going to have better value accrual than one BTC locked tomorrow. So there is like sort of a there is some benefit to being first here, if that makes sense. Which will be interesting to see that dynamic. I mean, I expect it to really just what is the synth utilization for BTC right now? Is there any synth cap available?
Right now it's like the utilization's at 6.8%, which is about a fifth the way that's allowed. So the amount of synthetic BTC will, if imagine that we launch a feature and the thing gets maxed out on day one, which that probably won't happen, but like we'll just imagine that's true just for the sake of discussion. That means that the number of synths in the Bitcoin pool will go up by 5x what it is now, which 5x in terms of the number of BTC that is. I have to actually do some math to figure that out, but it would be a good amount of BTC, and then an equal value in, or 50% of that value in Rune will be probably purchased off of the market and then dumped into the pool. And so that's going to create a natural buy pressure as well.
All right, there's your alpha, folks.
There's a alpha scoop.
The alpha scoop. Okay, cool. I don't know. Do we want to do a Q&A or do we want to just do that for Friday?
No, we can do Q&A. This is specific to this particular thing. So if you want to ask questions about, and we'll also do a Q&A every Friday as well, but which is more general. But in this context, if anyone wants to ask questions about savers or POL, this is the time.
How do you do that? Can people speak? Can anyone speak right now other than us?
Somebody try raising your hand and let's see if we can give them access. I'm not sure.
I'm new to this one as well.
I do kind of like this platform though. It's pretty cool.
Is my microphone working?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, that worked. I guess we didn't even raise his hand. I think we just anybody.
Yeah, I think people can just unmute and speak.
All right. That sounds like chaos to me, but okay, let's do it.
I mean,
nobody say anything controversial. Everybody's gonna be yelling.
I know historically the promotion has been left to the interfaces such as THORSwap, DeFi Spot, etc. When I look at somewhat competing products on Twitter, like Sovereign Zero on the Risk Network sidechain, BTC sidechain can be seen as a competitor. They have pretty good promotional materials available right from the protocol, and they talk about institutional onboarding. I was wondering if you guys can speak to any institutional onboarding going on, because I guess for me personally, that's my main concern regarding adoption.
Gavin, this is perfect for you.
yeah, I was going to say on the adoption front, that's just part of our job is to make materials. I mean, on the integration side, we've been laying the groundwork with a lot of folks for the last several months leading into this. So it's not like it's a totally cold start. And the people who are going to be building products on this are very aware of how it interacts, how you have to make calls. And in terms of what Pluto was walking through, the design of the interface itself, a memo list design, that's all been informed by some of the folks who are power users and who are going to be building products on top of it. So from that perspective, we're in pretty decent shape. We'll also be producing materials, as this rolls out for the community, for people to share. But in terms of sharing, I mean, that's on everybody here. But if folks want to be involved in creation of materials, things like that, hit us up in Discord, and the more the merrier.
Yeah, I'm more worried about having to be a party pooper and have to like slow the roll and tamp down on the speed at which we're growing the protocol owned liquidity, because I think the demand for savings vaults is going to be so high. It's so fast that people are just going to be saying constantly, there's going to be a ton of pressure from our partners, from users, from basically everyone to want to add more protocol and liquidity faster. That to me is going to like, and so what I'm personally dreading is like having to be a party pooper and say like, oh, I don't know, guys, like does it really make sense to like put a third of the protocol reserve into, you know, into the liquidity pools? Like what happens if, you know, there's a big, if the bear market gets even worse, right? Like I'm more worried about like that than honestly than finding enough people to use this feature. I think that we're gonna be good on that front.
I generally agree with what Pluto just said. I think if you take the party pooper perspective on this, is that, you know, there's going to be much more demand for it than what we'll allow. Similar like to what it was when we first launched the network multi-chain chaos net, and everybody wanted to dump into the pools, but the pools are full within like 5 minutes of like upping the caps. To even party poop a little bit further, just to kind of set expectations. So at least how I see it, which maybe end up that I'm wrong, but like, because this feature is going to be in so demand and people are going to be jumping into it, the amount of TVL relative to the bond is going to change. I'm assuming, you know, significantly, and so the pools are going to be more or less full, and the bond's going to be the issue at that point. And so the yield on LPs and savers is going to be probably pretty low relative to historics, and the yield for nodes is probably going to be pretty high relative to historics. And so I'm expecting like the yield for the Bitcoin savers, for example, to be like probably sub 1%, you know, APY, which sounds abysmal relative to DeFi land, but relative to Bitcoin yield land, that's absolutely phenomenal. Which is kind of funny to think about.
Totally. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Going once, going twice. Anyone can unmute and ask.
There's questions in the chat as well here. I'm not sure if anybody's ask questions or just having general conversation. The recording will be a recording for people to watch later on or share or whatever.
Cool. All right, sweet. Thanks everyone for joining. We want to get this stuff up and running as soon as possible, so stay tuned for the next steps. Jump in and add your thoughts in the economic design channel, and we're going to be signaling to node operators that the vote is essentially ready to be conducted. So Spot Wiggum, you want to come up and say something? Jump on in. You should be unmuted.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. I was wondering, what do the team think are the biggest risks to the whole introduction of single saving? Is it just the leverage rune position for the protocol, or?
Yeah, the one thing, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what the dynamic is when LPs start to realize, like Chad was saying, that there's really like it's much safer. You don't need to take the rune side of the LP. So there's going to be, we expect some flight from single-sided LP to, from dual LPs to single-sided LP. And then like, you know, whether there's a lot of ILP paid out on that. But I think just like more generally, the way I think about the risk is, okay, if the synth utilization is at this much amount, you know, and this is this percentage of the protocol reserve is essentially in these pools, then how much do these pools have to go down? Like assume that these pools went down by this amount, and then all the savers withdrew, essentially swapping their synthetic assets to native assets. What ILP would that incur on the dual-sided LPs? And then what would basically what would happen if like people just like decided to leave, and how many people would have to leave at over what time period in order to create enough of a liability on the protocol reserve that then there was like essentially there could be not like a downward spiral like we call it in when we talk about like stable coins, but almost like a downward spiral of incentives, right? If we were to wipe out, say, like a third of the protocol reserve, then node operators and LPs would be making a third less from block rewards, which might actually tip the scale enough to make it so that it's like no longer really profitable to run a node. So we want to like we want to basically prevent anything that prevents any like sudden and violent contractions of the network. Whether that, you know, it won't be like like one day, you know, everything just goes to zero like it was with Terra, but we'll just like as we add more like leverage to the protocol, it will basically exacerbate the swings and it will pull the incentives in directions that, you know, we might not want them to be pulled in as you know. It's essentially you're just adding a multiplicative effect to any pain that you know that you would feel otherwise. But that's okay, right? Like everything in economics and in banking is built on leverage. So you just have to be upfront with yourself about how much leverage you're willing to take, and to have good you know, monitoring around risk. And that was why I said one of the key deliverables for 9 Realms is to essentially deliver some dashboards that allow the community to see what the current outstanding risks are, and to basically have some, you know, have some sort of like default scenarios in mind, and to make sure, you know, if we ever approach one of those scenarios, given current market conditions, that we can kind of, you know, make sure that the alerts are firing to the right people, and that we're making decisions to sort of, you know, I mean, essentially like the node operators need to start like acting like a Federal Reserve of sorts, and deciding which assets they want to buy up, and, you know, how do we want to use the protocol. It is a form of economic policy that we are asking node operators to conduct. But again, good policy can, you know, help grow the network by orders of magnitude in the right market conditions, and that's what we're here to do, is to see this thing you know, get its next 100x. So if we do this right, if we time this right, and if we monitor the risks correctly, this is going to have immense benefits. And so, you know, it's always just it's using risk wisely and not to get, you know, drunk on greed.
Just to answer your question, Wiggum, more directly, like you were asking about leverage room positions and all that kind of stuff. So Savers by itself does not actually change that at all. That's controlled by the cap that's being placed on the network. So if that SIM cap gets increased for whatever reason, that's when the leverage room position for regular dual-sided LPs would be affected. The intention, at least my intention, is that we would increase that number to be 50% of the pool depth. And the reason why that is just because that would create a 1-to-1 ratio between the buy pressure and sell pressure of the Rune asset when people are adding savers or withdrawing it in either direction. Other people in the team have talked about they wanted 67% because they wanted like for every $1 of savings entered, $2 of buy pressure is applied to the Rune asset. That's a discussion we had later. But this enabling savers by itself does not have that risk of increasing the leverage room position for LPs. The POL actually does that, or rather, the POL's target number that it goes to relative to the cap is. But yeah, certainly there's always risk in any platform, in any economic system, any given moment. I am not terribly concerned about you know, spiral to zero as what Pluto is just saying.
No, I don't think that would happen. I'm saying that would never happen here. It would be like a bit more of like a longer tail of just like, okay, something like crazy in the market happened, and that shifts the incentives a little bit, and then it takes a while for like THORChain, you know, node operators and LPs to respond by like pulling capital. But I don't think it would be sharp at all.
Yeah. Okay. One caveat though to one of the things you said is that the act of the POL adding liquidity into a pool means that there's less rune in the reserve, and that means that block rewards are affected by that, right? So, like just the act of the POL taking a position in a pool will cause block rewards to go down some small percentage. How much that is probably going to be very, very little amount, just because it's kind of hard to calculate because the ratio is the decline is not linear. It is non-linear. But like if there's 170 million rune in the reserve, and the maximum amount of rune that you could even fit in the pools right now is, let's just say that it's like 10 million rune, which is probably not too far from where it actually is. I haven't looked in a few months, so I actually don't know what it is off my head, but let's just call it 10 million. And so only half of that can be put in because of the savers have to be put in as well. So like it's 5 million rune or something like this. Like that's not enough that it's going to actually cause a significant change, at least not in my opinion, to the block rewards. Obviously, it's going to cause you to go down some amount, but it wouldn't be like 80% down or something crazy like this. It would be something closer to like 10 to 15% or something like that, which wouldn't be all that significant. I mean, it's some level of significance, but not all level of significance.
Cool. Yeah, there's some questions like, is this going to be sustainable for the reserve? The reserve is and always has been like a bootstrapping mechanism, right? So it's meant for block rewards, so to bootstrap bond, to bootstrap LPs, to bootstrap protocol, like even protocol owned liquidity is a form of bootstrapping, right? So the protocol reserve isn't actually necessary for the protocol to function as like an L1 swapping savings lending. Yeah, there are different parts of it that help bootstrap that, but yeah, like to multi-partites, it's essentially like a VC runway, right? Like we've raised money, we essentially set this aside, but like we can now use that to like build a sustainable business. But at some point, like the economics of the business have to make sense on their own without the protocol reserve. So I don't see this as a question of like, oh, we shouldn't do this because it's not sustainable. Like the point is that it's not sustainable, right? Like you spend money up front to make money in the future because everyone knows how the model works, right? So like that's kind of like where we're at with it, is like how best do we spend this protocol reserve to get the network into a state where it's fully self-sufficient. And that essentially happens when there's enough liquidity and there's enough volume going through the pools that everyone in the system is incentivized to stay, because those fees are essentially subsidizing the full operation of the network from do we have enough liquidity to do we have enough security. So yeah, like I think it's important to think about it in that way, but the protocol like going to zero at some point in like in the future is not necessarily it's not a concern for me. That's a hypothesis. I think that it will at some point, and by that point the network will have been around long enough, will be installed in enough, it will have enough wallet and front end integrations and dexes and an ecosystem that's healthy enough to sustain it for many years, or at least that's the hope.
So I just looked it up just out of curiosity. The amount of rune in the nodes right now, in the active set at least, is about 75 million rune. It's about another like 9 or 10 million kind of on standby right now. That'll eventually get churned in. And then there's about 40 million rune like of space in the nodes right now, and the pools rather. And so half of that could be added by the POL in the most extreme, ridiculous scenarios. Like it's the absolute maximum mathematically. And so that'd be 20 million rune out of the 160 or 170 million, whatever the number is. Like it's not even 10, it's barely even 10%, right, of the reserve. So it's a very small percentage of it.
Yeah, good point. Sorry, yeah. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So we could start off with like 1 or 2 million, and then we could 10x that, and we'd be at our sort of theoretical max until the security budget was increased.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the point in some ways of like the lending design, just to help scale the bond side to not in terms of number of room, but in terms of like dollar value, right?
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we can go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you guys for joining us for this hour. Some really good questions as always. Thank you to the audience for just the amazing engagement. We can continue this discussion in the economic design channel, and we'll be happy to do more discussion of this over the next several weekly Twitter spaces as we continue to roll out the feature.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. If you have more questions, just go poke anybody in the economics channel, and we're happy to answer the question.
Yes, the recording will be posted to Kiyoshi. We'll post that in somewhere. All right, guys. Cheers.